quote, "You don't have a right to infect others," close quote. Now, if you haven't heard this saying, well, you're probably living under a rock or just have isolated yourself from the media, social media, and the rest of the outside world. But is that really true? So we'll ponder this latest example of the tyranny of fear next on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Well, hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study, where we read and study the Constitution. We teach the rising generation to be free. I am glad you could join me. As always, I'm going to point you to that website, constitutionstudy.com. It's where you can find everything I'm doing here at the Constitution Study. The book was recently released, so you have a chance to go and purchase the ebook and get some other goodies while you're at it. It's also where you can ask questions. I answer a lot of those. And you can find out where I'm speaking or invite me to come speak to one of your groups. Don't worry about social distancing. We can do the whole thing over the internet if you like. It's all about this interaction of a group of all of us. I'm going to encourage you to keep your eyes out because I'm going to be launching a new project called the Constitution Scholar. There was some previews of it in the pre-launch for the book, but it'll be another place where scholars can get together. We can take this reading and studying kind of to the next level. So keep your eyes out for that. But let's start talking about this tyranny of fear and one of the latest examples. That is this idea of you don't have a right to infect others. Now, right off the top, let me tell you, we should not be out infecting others. If you have the virus or you have reason to believe you have the virus, you owe it to your fellow citizen to isolate yourself. And if you must go out in public, do everything you can to prevent infection and let people know that you may be a carrier. That's common courtesy. But this idea that we should all be forced to, quote unquote, shelter in place because someone's afraid that we may infect somebody, well, I have two things to say about that. First, I can pretty much prove that most people who say that don't believe it. How do I know this? Because I'm pretty sure that most of the people who use that phrase have not quarantined themselves for the common cold. I thought you didn't have the right to infect people. So if you have sniffles, a runny nose, a cough, a fever, they don't quarantine themselves. They don't put a big red sign on their front door going, "Hey, I've got a virus, don't come near me." Now, they didn't do it for the seasonal flu. They didn't do it for the avian flu. They didn't do it for the swine flu. They didn't do it for SARS. They didn't do it for MERS. This idea that everybody has to stop because someone is afraid they might get infected, well, that's the tyranny of fear. But there's another important point, and that is it takes the idea of rights and turns it on its head. What do I mean? Well, in order for the saying, you have no right to infect somebody, to make sense, you have to assume that everybody is already infected. You see, if the idea is I can't be allowed to leave my home because I might infect somebody, is the assumption that I'm already infected. To be told that you can't leave your home because you might infect somebody assumes you are already infected. But there's a problem. There's no evidence. There's no probable cause in most cases that we are infected. Now, people call this a quarantine. This is not a quarantine. A quarantine is when someone has reasonable cause to be considered contagious. If you've tested positive for COVID-19 and you've been told to stay home, that's a quarantine. The people that got off the cruise ship that had COVID-19 running through it, they were told to isolate for 2 weeks. That's a quarantine. To tell everybody else without any evidence or probable cause that they are contagious to stay at home, that's not a quarantine. That's internment. Granted, it's home internment, it's internment. To threaten people, ticket people, and in some cases even arrest people for going out of their homes and attending gatherings, for exercising their rights, the right of assembly, their right to practice their religion, just their right to be at liberty. It's not quarantine, it's internment. You see, you have a right to your life, liberty, and property to not have that taken from you without due process of law. That's the Fifth Amendment. And the states can't do that. That was confirmed in the 14th Amendment. But we have people who are afraid that they might get sick, trying to tell everybody else how to live their lives. Now, as I said, if you are sick, you should not be out and about. If you have probable cause that you may be sick, you should not be out and about. I know people who actually have got the COVID-19 virus. I know people who thought they'd been in contact with people who had the COVID-19 virus, and they voluntarily quarantined themselves. There was no government order, no government mandate required. They simply did the right thing and stayed at home. But to cripple the entire United States because you're afraid somebody somewhere might have the virus and spread it to you, that's not exercising a right, that's exercising tyranny. If you're afraid you might get sick, if you're afraid you might get infected, then the way to exercise your rights is for you to social distance yourself. Stay away from people. Wear a mask, wear gloves, wash your hands, use hand sanitizer. Stay at home. See, then you're exercising your right to not expose yourself to something you think is dangerous. You're also going to have to exercise the consequences of having done that. But when you tell other people that they must not exercise their liberty because you're afraid, that's tyranny. That's not liberty. And it's a type of tyranny we've gotten very used to. We've become a country that is used to not only getting our way, but forcing other people to live the way we want. This has been reinforced. It's been reinforced in the schools. It's been reinforced with political correctness. It's been reinforced by the courts. It's been reinforced in government. This idea that we have a right to tell other people how to live our lives. Well, guess what? We don't. Now, if you want to live at liberty, if you want to once again be a free people, then we have to take responsibility for our actions. And I'm going to say it again. If you have probable cause that you may be infectious, you should stay at home. And if you refuse to do that, if you knowingly become a risk to others, you threaten their safety, well, then you can be incarcerated. But if there's no probable cause, then the Fourth Amendment stands. The Fourth Amendment says you're to be protected from unreasonable search and seizure. Reasonable being reasonable people think this is true. That in order to seize you or secure you, the government must have probable cause supported by oath or affirmation. Those are rights. Now, states have laws, but those states' laws are superseded by the state constitutions. And while I haven't read all the state constitutions, my understanding is each one has a Bill of Rights, and each one in that Bill of Rights protects your right to life, liberty, and property, and to do so without due process of law, to protect you from unreasonable seizures, from takings. Now, those state constitutions are one thing, but we also have a supreme law, the U.S. Constitution. It supersedes state law, it supersedes state constitution, it supersedes federal law not made pursuant to the Constitution. And it says that you cannot be seized or searched without probable cause. There's got to be reasonable searches, and warrants must be issued based on probable cause. So this idea of interning everybody, and I use that word for a reason. You see, as I said, this isn't a quarantine. This is incarceration. This is internment. This is telling the American people you must stay at home or else. I don't care why they're doing it. They have no legal authority to do so. It is a violation of the supreme law of the land. Now, again, if there's probable cause, if somebody can go and say, wait a second, this person tested positive, this person has been exposed, this person has symptoms, well then, yeah, I could understand the government saying, if you will not stay home voluntarily, we will force you. But telling innocent, everyday Americans, people where there's no probable cause that they are contagious, to stay at home is tyranny. And it bothers me that we've watched what little liberties we still thought we had evaporate. No, I applaud governors in those few states that have stood up and said, no, we are not New York City. Our conditions are different. We do not have a rampant problem here. We will recommend social distancing. We will recommend certain things, but we're not going to lock people up. But I would like to make one last point before I sign this one out. I do believe that the vast majority of people who are using this line of you don't have a right to infect people, they're doing it out of fear. It's not a malicious attempt to gain power. They truly are afraid, and they're acting out of fear. And for that, I think the best thing to do is education. But as I see what's going on in this country, in states like Michigan and some in New York and California and others, I don't see this as fear. This too much has the whiff of the intoxication of power. When I see governors threatening to arrest people, Michigan, Kentucky, when I see people in Kentucky ticketed and threatened with arrest for sitting in their cars separate from everyone else just because they happen to be in a church parking lot, that is not fear, that is tyranny. That is the intoxication of power. When I see mayors encouraging their citizens to turn in to snitch on people who don't toe the line, that is not fear, that's the intoxication of power. When I see states determining what businesses can and cannot do business, not based on what the businesses need, not based on what the citizens in that community need, but based on what they think is best, that is not fear, that is power intoxication. So all the people in all the cities and all the states that have watched their rights evaporate, that have maybe learned that our liberties are dependent not on government but upon us exercising them, I have one simple question. Will you remember this come the next election? Not just the one this November, but all of the governors, the mayors, the county mayors, the county councils, the city councils, the legislators, when they come up for election, will you remember what they've done during this crisis? Because what you do when you're scared can tell you a lot about what you'll do day in and day out. And if what people do when they're scared is destroy the rights of their fellow Americans, are they really the people you want representing you? If not, why are you voting for them? And to those who have stood up and said, no, we will not bow to fear, we will protect rights, my question is the same. The people in those states, will you stand up and say, you know what? That was a brave move, and I'll stand with you for it. It's not a simple binary decision. There's a lot going on, but we've had an opportunity to learn a lot about those we've hired to represent us, those we've hired to work in our governments. Will we remember that at their next evaluation, their next election? Or will we simply be like sheep? Will we be like the Japanese that walked calmly into the internment camps? Oh, sure, the camp may be your home, but if you're told by the government that you must stay in one place without any probable cause, it may be a cage of gold, but it's still a cage. So I hope you found that interesting. I hope I answered the people who commented on my media pages and my website, even the ones that got rather vulgar, that this is not about letting fear run away with us. It's about exercising our rights and doing so properly. To those of you who've used some less than pleasant terms to describe what I should do with my desire to exercise rights and liberty, I hope you've learned a little bit here. I hope you understand that rights are not about what you'll allow other people to do, but about what you will do. Hopefully I've dispelled some of that fear. And if not, hopefully you'll learn to channel it better, to use it to restrict yourself rather than trying to use it to restrict others. And hopefully you'll stop by and we can talk about some other things next time on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from